to the system or vice versa without the expenditure of the work. Delta U is equal to Q plus W. constant volume QV is equal to Cp delta T, that is equal to delta U. At defined as the enthalpy change per mole of a substance when it undergoes combustion and all the reactants and products being in the standard states at the specified temperature. equal to H minus T into S. Gibbs function is an extensive property. Change in the Gibbs energy is equal to delta G of the system, that is equal to delta H of the system minus T into delta S of the system minus S into delta T of the